Hi folks, and welcome back to the final episode of my Scottish Odyssey. Taking up from where we left off at Leverburgh on Harris, we catch the Calmac ferry and take the 80-minute trip among the myriad of tiny islands and skerries that stud the Sound of Harris to land at Ottenish on North Uist. Ottenish lies at the southern end of the causeway to the island of Berneray. Most of the island's population, which numbers around 140, live in the twin settlements of Bove and Rushgarry. To the southwest lie the twin hills of Benshleeve and Bove Hill, and to the northwest, one of the longest uninterrupted beaches in Scotland. Since Prince Charles stayed here on one of the working crofts, the island has become a popular tourist destination. This modern dwelling seen here is being built beside the island's natural harbour at Bayslock. Island Humour, a sign outside the island's one and only cafe. A memorial to Angus MacAskill, the Nova Scotia giant. I'll leave this on as long as it takes you to read the information. One of the best coastal walks in the Hebrides is the circuit of Berneray. Starting from the dunes near the youth hostel at Bove and keeping close to the shoreline, the walk is over 10 miles long. However, it can be shortened by cutting across the Macaire back to Bove. This ancient burial ground is on the slopes of Benshleeve, which at 305 foot is the highest point on Berneray. Dropping down from Benshleeve, the walk continues along Berneray's north and then west coast, nearly 4 miles of continuous beach. On our last visit, we camped here in the dunes and set off so early in the morning that we had its whole length entirely to ourselves. Back onto North Uist, the main road travels south along the coast past several crossing communities and sandy beaches to Grenitope, and where a walk goes out across the dunes along Tregair, seen here to the promontory at Outer. Passing along the island side of the promontory, the path passes this ancient MacLean cemetery. Dropping round from the high points at the end to picturesque Tregoudal from the windswept trig point on Outer, seen here with the snow-covered hills of Harris in the distance. The walk continues south along yet more deserted beaches. Another seascape taken from another time, but from the same area. A few kilometres south takes us to the village of Malaclet and the tidal island of Valais. At low tide, it's possible to drive across where this windsurfer is, to the island in the background. Just south of Malaclet, a narrow road known locally as the Committee Road cuts across the moorland. Near its summit, we came across this old tractor, which in fact is a work of art dedicated to the TEF-20 tractor, workhorse of the Hebrides. This one was left abandoned where it was last used. The tractor is now rusting away and gradually blending into the colours of its surroundings. Dropping back down to the coast and travelling south again, this is the causeway out onto the island of Bailshare. Many of the islands are connected with such similar causeways. This was taken looking back across the strand from Bailshare to the mainland. And here we are yet again on a common theme, miles and miles of deserted beach, this time along the Atlantic west coast of Bailshare. Back across the causeway and onto the mainland overlooking the island, we came across another sculpture, this time in the form of this mosaic bench, its colours reflecting the colours of the sea and the sky. Returning back to the road junction at Clachan, the A867 cuts across North Uist to the island's main community and ferry terminal at Lochmaddy. A couple of kilometres along the road brings us to Ben Langas, the only hill in a vast landscape of interlinked lochans. On the south side of the hill is this stone circle known as Pobble Finn, which translates as Finn's people, after the Gaelic hero Fingal. This is the largest of the remaining stones, seen with Iarval in the background. Another shot of the circle and its remaining 12 stones can be seen from the slopes of Ben Langas, with Loch Langas in the background. On the north side lies Barpa Langas, a Neolithic chambered cairn, which at first glance just looks like a heap of stones. However, on the east side lies this narrow entrance. Although partially collapsed, if you're brave and thin enough, you can just squeeze a couple of people into the entrance chamber. Continuing east, we come to the Port and Calmac ferry terminal at Lochmaddy. Lochmaddy translates as Loch of the Hounds, referring to two of the hundreds of islands and skerries in the bay. Early historical reports complain of it as being a hotbed of piracy and contraband. Raiding ships could easily lose themselves among its many coves and inlets. Today, fishing and the fish farming industries keep the port busy, with the village comprising of most of the commercial property on North Uist. Returning back along the A867 to near Ben Langas, from where a narrow road leads back eastward along the south side of Loch Uport, eventually culminating at Clachan Burravel. From here a walk weaves its way between a myriad of lochs and lochans of all shapes and sizes, past this tiny natural harbour, on our way across the moorland to Iarval. Iarval, at 1,138 foot, is the highest hill on North Uist and dominates the skyline for miles around. Here we are, thoroughly soaked, returning from Iarval, when in true Scottish manner the clouds lift, the rain stops, and out comes the sun. As with most walks in this area, you have to time your walk with the tides, as these stepping stones across the outfall of freshwater Loch Odyssey into tidal Loch Uport were almost underwater and considerably slippery on the way in. Back to the west coast and a mile south of Baleshare lies the village of Carinish, and this the Trinity Temple. These are the ruins of a 13th century Augustinian nunnery, founded by the daughter of Somerled, the first lord of the Isles. Also at Carinish is this traditional Hebridean White House, once again with Iarval in the distance. Between Carinish on North Uist and Grammersdale on Benbecula, our next island in the chain, lies this, the North Ford Causeway, 5 mile of single track road as seen here. Before the causeway was built in 1960, the journey was made by ferry, which could only operate at high tide. Halfway along the causeway, a single track road heads off eastward and completes a circuit of the tidal island of Grimsay, and this the important harbour at Callin. The harbour, besides supporting a large shellfish industry, houses a marine repair yard. Continuing south across the causeway, we come to Benbecula itself. The island has its own airport with daily flights to Glasgow, Stornoway and Barra. It also has a strong military presence with a missile firing range and early warning station. From the island's rubbish dump, this track leads eastward past Ruaval at 405 foot, the highest and only hill on the island. These bags are full of peat waiting to be picked up. The scenery here behind Barbara gives you an idea of some of the landscape of Benbecula. This is the climb up to the summit of Ruaval. From Ruaval, a rough and sometimes very indistinct footpath continues east for about 5 kilometres to the virtual island of Rushinish and this solitary ruined cottage. The only possible way the materials for this cottage could have come in is by the sea. However, on the 27th of June in 1746, a certain Flora MacDonald set sail from somewhere very close to here, and the legend of her and the famous song Over the Sea to Sky was born. Flora, a local girl, had been persuaded to guide bonnie Prince Charlie across the Minch to Scotland, accompanied by her maid Betty Burke, actually the prince himself in disguise, plus her manservant, the prince's companion. They were eventually put ashore just north of Uig on the Isle of Skye. A couple of miles south again along the main A865 and yet another narrow road heads off eastward across a string of islands, all linked by small causeways as seen here. In this landscape, even the fields are connected by causeways. The road culminates at the southernmost corner of Benbecula at the tiny sheltered harbour of Port Fedder. Retracing our steps once again back to the A865 and we arrive at Southford and yet another causeway, this time from Craigorry on Benbecula to Carnan on South Uist. Here we are on South Uist, the second largest of the Outer Hebrides and a stronghold of Gaelic speakers who are 90% Roman Catholic. And one of the first things you will notice driving south are a number of these roadside shrines. A mile south of the causeway and yet another moorland road strikes off to the southwest, along Loch Carnan to the road end at Kailas Louvesery, and the start of a circular walk along Loch Skipport. The view north is still dominated by Eoval, and another feature of North Uist, Benbecula and this part of South Uist, big skies. However, looking south across the Loch Newport, the landscape starts to change and the high ground reappears with a chain of high hills running the length of the rugged east coast. A stark contrast to this, the west coast is all low-lying macair, with the beach running the whole length of the island. This is just one of the many deserted houses found in the most unlikely places. From all different periods of history, they proliferate along the barren east coast of the Hebrides. Some, like this, are nearly as they were left when the residents went. Continuing south across the Loch Bee Causeway, this statue, Our Lady of the Isles, appears on the slopes of another Ruaval. The granite statue, designed by Hugh Lorimer, was erected in 1958 as a protest against plans for a large missile testing range, which would have destroyed much of the island's way of life. This shot taken from the statue gives you some idea of the flat landscape along the Macair and South Uist's west coast. Yet inland, not far from the statue, is this standing stone, one of many on the island on the sides of slopes of the hills. A mile south of the statue brings us to the National Nature Reserve at Loch Drudebeg. This seen here with the high hills of South Uist in the background. The next large habitation going south along the Macaire is at Howmore. This is Howmore Church of England. Unusual given that South Uist is predominantly Roman Catholic, and yet this is most probably the most famous church on the island. A quick précis to this notice board at Howmore, which states the area has been an important ecclesiastical site since the early 6th century, with ruins of 5 chapels in close proximity. The picture an artist's impression what it might have looked like in medieval times. This is one of the chapels, and one of the many lichen encrusted crosses. A typical image of the area with Howmore Church in the distance. This is the Macaire Way, a 35-kilometre section of the long-distance Hebridean Way which runs the length of the Hebrides. The next 2 images are typical of farming practices on the Macaire. Each strip belongs to a different crofter. How they tell the boundaries completely beats me. Also at Howmore is this traditionally built youth hostel with Ben Moore in the background. A close-up of the detail of the way the thatch is held in place during the gales which lash in from the Atlantic. All the islands seem to do it in a slightly different fashion. These next 3 shots, taken along the coastal strip, go a long way to explaining why the boulders in the previous shot are necessary. A further 7 kilometres down the coast brings us to Dunvoolan, another national monument. Dunvoolan is an Iron Age galleried broch. At one time situated on an island within a freshwater loch, but now it sits on a narrow promontory at danger of succumbing to the sea. 2 images of all that remain and the stonework. This one facing the Atlantic, this one facing inland. As with everything around here, notice heavily encrusted with lichen. Retracing a short way from Dunvoolan, and another single-track road goes east, signposted to Loch Einault. Passing on the way this lochen, with a squall passing over the summit of Ben Moore in the background. This is a sunset over Loch Einault from the front porch of the converted shieling we had taken once for a week. The road end at North Loch Einault provides the easiest access to Ben Moore and the remote wild hills along South Uist's rugged coast. The next 2 images were taken looking back as we climbed higher into the hills. Two more shots of the landscape, this time looking into the hills as we climbed higher. And finally, looking north from the summit of Ben Moore across Ben Corradale towards Hecla with its head in the clouds. The hill names here are a mixture of Gorse and Gaelic. This shot was taken looking north across Loch Einault from the thatched cottage, which was being used for little more than a storeroom. Back on the main road, we passed the extended community of Smirclet with this typical skyscape. The main road down the west coast ends at Pollica on the southwestern corner of South Uist, and this prominent standing stone looking south towards the island of Barra. This image was taken later in the day from virtually the same spot as the previous, but this time looking northwest. This picture, taken prior to 2000, is the old ferry terminal at Horn on the Isle of Eriskay, with South Uist in the background. However, since the previous photo, this causeway, completed in 2001, makes visiting Eriskay from the north much easier. Although the island is only 2.5 by 1.5 miles in size, it has a number of claims to fame. Among them, the Eriskay Pony, the Eriskay Love Lilt, and the film Whiskey Galore. Eriskay's wild ponies are allowed to wander anywhere on the island. We've even come across them on the summit of Ben Screen. Here, this rather sad specimen is outside the Church of St. Michael's, which has this unusual boat-shaped altar. Sorry folks, but I won't even attempt to pronounce the name of this beautiful beach on Eriskay's west coast. Suffice it to say, the English translation is the Prince's Cockleshell Strand, so named because of yet another of the island's claims to fame. Bonnie Prince Charlie's first steps on Scottish soil were taken here. Eriskay is another island which makes a good circular walk, taking in Bed Screen, the highest point at 607 foot. This shot was taken from the summit looking east across the Midge back to the mainland. And this one looking north across the Sound of Eriskay back to South Uist. We came across this waymarker near Loch Crackerveigh, but no sign of a path across this moorland. However, the fires in the distance were begging to be explored. Here we are near the fires, and this cross on the slopes of Ben Crackerveigh marks the site of an old fisherman's chapel and a local artist's recreation of the Way of Sorrows leading up to it from the shore. Closer image of the burning of the heather, this time Eriskay style, with the ruined croft coming out of the smoke. Another shot taken from near the summit, this time of the Calmac ferry from Barra as it lands on Eriskay. Barra can be seen across there in the background. Well, all good things come to an end, and we have to bid farewell to the Outer Hebrides as we leave across the Minch to Uig on Skye. And here we are looking down on the Calmac ferry terminal at Uig with the morning mist clearing in the background. Arguably, many people no longer regard Skye as an island since the bridge was built, but clearly not the island's residents. However, it's an island I have a love-hate relationship with. It's become overcrowded now as it's on the itinerary for tourists worldwide. I first came to the island in the late 50s with my parents, in the early 60s with my climbing mates, and then on my honeymoon, after which I never returned for 30 years. Because of its commercialism, I no longer have the feeling for the place I used to. Having said that, the mountains are still the same, like this shot of the Quirang. And two more images taken along the Trottenish Ridge. Skye is so big it could do with a chapter to itself, so the following images are just a taster of what there is scenically on the island. This is the road from Dunvegan to Colbost. And this is Helleval Moor, or MacLeod's Table, seen from Osdale River. Another scenic high point is Nest Lighthouse at Waterstein. The storm light across Loch Brackerdale, seen from near Orbost. This is typical of the coastal scenery. These are the sea cliffs at Idrigal Point. Scanning further left from the last images, and these are the sea stacks off Idrigal Point, known as MacLeod's Maidens. As of late, the fairy pools on the road to Glenbrittle have become a very popular location with club photographers. Here seen in the background, Scuramfearden and the Waterpipe Gully. First ascent of this was made in 1895. This is Marscough, shrouded in clouds, seen from across the River Slagachen. Another view down Glen Slagachen on another day, with a wider lens. The Black Coolin and Scuan Gillian reflected in this tiny lochen at Slagachen. It's a long time since I did any climbing in the Cooling, but this shot of Barbara on Scuana Street looking down on Loch Corrusk will give you some idea of this stupendous mountain ridge. These are the red Coolins seen here from Loch Einort. Moving further south, this is Blaven, seen from across Loch Slappin near the marble quarry. Back in the 1960s, the water of the loch along this stretch was bright green and white from marble dust washed down into it. Another shot of Blaven, this time from Reedy Loch Kilchrist, and this is one from the same place, but looking north to Ben na Calico, peak of the Old Woman. Having said all about my feelings for Skye, there is still one way I always access or leave the island if possible, and that is by the old turntable ferry, the motor vessel Glenacoolish at Kyrrea. This is the last manually operated turntable ferry, not only in Scotland but apparently in the whole world. As a boy, I can remember a number of these operating all up the Scottish coast from Connell to Kylescoo. You might notice who's driving the Jeep. Well, that's it, folks. Hope you enjoyed the journey. Sorry if I skipped any of your favourite haunts along the coast, but with a country which still has 20% of its area designated wild, I hope this has been a taste of that. And finally, an apology to all Gaelic speakers. I hope I haven't strangled your language too much.